Hello and welcome to passage number 13 of this particular series. I am Vikrant, your personal coach for all things related to English and communication skills. And you and I sit down here together to make ourselves better in different aspects. So this is going to be the 13th passage of the series. And I welcome you to iQuanta's YouTube channel that is dedicated towards helping you achieve your true potential and actually even enhance your potential. And therefore, if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and press that bell icon as well. So as usual, we are going to go ahead and work in two distinct rounds. Round one is where you read the passage and go through the questions by pausing the video at appropriate moments. And round two is where you and I work together and look at the entire passage threadbare and then move over to the questions and learn how to pick up the best option in each one of those cases. So here you go. First paragraph of the passage. Pause the video here, read it, and then come back. Next. Next. Next and the last paragraph. And with that, let us now dive into our questions. So question number one, please pause and answer this question before you proceed further. Okay, question number two, pause and answer. Question number three, again pause and answer. And here is your question number four, the fourth and the last question for you. Are we through with it? Okay, so now is the time when you and I sit down and read this together. Let's start. So it starts with talking about the Chinese. So the Chinese have two different concepts of a copy. Fangzi pin, which are imitations where the difference from the original is obvious. So, I mean, a copy where the craftsperson has not paid a lot of attention in accuracy. So these are small models or copies that can be purchased in a museum shop, for example. The second concept for a copy is Fuji pin. They are exact reproductions of the original, which for the Chinese are of equal value to the original. It has absolutely no negative connotation. So, oh, this is strange, huh? So as long as it is an exact replica, the Chinese do not consider it bad. They don't think that it is in any way less important than the original. The discrepancy with regard to the understanding of what a copy is has often led to misunderstandings and arguments between China and Western museums. So there is a disagreement with respect to what exactly should be considered a copy. So for the Chinese, there is no negative connotation associated with a copy as long as it is a perfect replica. But it appears that for Western museums, even if it is a perfect replica, they seem to have some problem, some issue with it. So let's see. Let's read further. The Chinese often send copies abroad instead of originals in the firm belief that they are not essentially different from the originals. The rejection that then comes from the Western museums is perceived by the Chinese as an insult. So you notice that cultural difference, that cultural misunderstanding here. Then next, the Far Eastern notion of identity is also very confusing to the Western observer. So copy versus original, and now we are saying the very idea of identity is also very confusing to the Western observer. The Ise Grand Shrine in Japan is 1300 years old for the millions of Japanese people who go there on pilgrimage every year, but in reality this temple complex is completely rebuilt from scratch every 20 years. Okay, the Cathedral of Freiburg Minster in southwest Germany is covered in scaffolding almost all year round. So scaffolding is that frame that you make out of pipes and wooden planks, etc., around a building, next to a building, in order to repair it. So the previous paragraph talked about a shrine, sort of a temple in Japan, and this talks about a cathedral in southwest Germany, which is covered in scaffolding almost all year round. The sandstone from which it is built is a very soft, porous material that does not withstand natural erosion by rain and wind. So I mean, everything erodes, you know, a tiny bit of it gets lost every year. Here in particular, the stone that is used is very soft and porous material. If a material is porous, it means that things, particularly things like water, can go into it very easily. So after a while it crumbles, okay, breaks down essentially. As a result, the cathedral is continually being examined for damage. Okay, so continually, it is not continuously. When you say continuously, it means that something happens without any interruption. On the other hand, when we say continually, it means that they inspect it at a regular interval. So they don't do it every day, they don't do it continuously all the time, but at some fixed regular intervals, they'll inspect the entire cathedral for damage, and eroded stones are replaced. And in the cathedral's dedicated workshop, copies of the damaged sandstone figures are constantly being produced. Okay, then the next paragraph. Of course, attempts are made to preserve the stones from the Middle Ages for as long as possible. So this tells us that those sandstones have come from the Middle Ages, and they do try to preserve it, but at some point they too are removed and replaced with new stones. All right. So fundamentally, this is the same operation as with the Japanese shrine, except in this case, the production of a replica takes place very slowly and over long periods of time. In the field of art as well, the idea of an unassailable original developed historically in the Western world. So it developed historically. So it is not that the Western world had this notion right from the very beginning. It came in later. So back in the 17th century in the West, excavated artworks from antiquity. Antiquity basically means from a very old time. Usually a time prior to the Middle Ages. So these Middle Ages is basically a period of what, 600 AD to 1500 AD. So things which are prior to, older than 600 AD are typically considered antiquities. So in the 17th century, these excavated artworks of that era prior to the Middle Ages, they were treated quite differently from today. They were not restored in a way that was faithful to the original. Instead, there was massive intervention in these works, changing their appearance. So today, you don't do that in the Western world, but back around, if you go back by around 300-400 years ago, you'd notice that it was being done. Okay, then it is probably this intellectual position that explains why Asians have far fewer scruples about cloning than Europeans. Now, what exactly is scruple? Scruples are essentially moral considerations. Okay, considerations about what is right and what is wrong before you go ahead and do it. But we are saying that when it comes to Asia, there are no moral considerations involved with involved with cloning. Essentially, what this sentence tells us is that when it comes to Asians, yeah, they don't think cloning is morally bad or something which has ethical connotations. The South Korean cloning researcher Wang Woo-suk, who attracted worldwide attention with his cloning experiments in 2004, is a Buddhist. He found a great deal of support and followers among Buddhists, while Christians called for a ban on human cloning. Wang legitimized his cloning experiments with his religious affiliations. And then what did he say? I'm Buddhist and I have no philosophical problem with cloning. And as you know, the basis of Buddhism is that life is recycled through reincarnation. So that karma, rebirth. In some ways, I think therapeutic cloning restarts the circle of life. Therapeutic cloning, okay, when it is done with the intention of helping somebody medically. So with that, let's dive into our questions now. So question number 1, based on the passage, which one of the following copies would a Chinese museum be unlikely to consider as having less value than the original? So I think the core philosophy of the Chinese with respect to this particular area is laid out in the first paragraph, where we meet these idea of Fangji pin and Fuji pin. So Fuji pin, as long as it's an exact reproduction of the original, it has equal value. So when we are asked which one of the following copies a Chinese museum would be unlikely to consider as having less value, or in other words, which one of the following will the Chinese consider having an equal value to the original? So what will have an equal value? Fujifilm, when it is an exact reproduction. So let us check. So A, Pablo Picasso's painting of Vincent van Gogh's original painting, identical in every respect. So they won't have any problem with it. It is an exact replica. Okay. B, Pablo Picasso's photograph of Vincent van Gogh's original painting, printed to exactly the same scale. So if I compare A with B, is B an exact replica, exact reproduction? In B, instead of painting, you are printing after clicking a photograph. So the material will change, the process will change. So as compared to A, we can say that compared to A, it is not going to be an exact reproduction. A is superior. So we can eliminate B. How about C? Pablo Picasso's miniaturized but otherwise faithful and accurate painting of Vincent van Gogh's original painting. So once again, is it an exact reproduction? No, because when you miniaturize it, you make it smaller. So you have changed the size. So even though everything else is same, it differs from the original in one respect. Then, so C can also be ruled out. This is something that they may consider to have less value. D, Pablo Picasso's painting of Vincent van Gogh's original painting bearing Picasso's signature. Now, two problems with it. Problem number one, we do not know whether it is an exact reproduction or not. And problem number two, we know that it differs in one specific way, and that is the signature. So somehow it suggests that Picasso is claiming that painting to be of his own. Moreover, as I said earlier, we do not know whether it is exact or not. So even this can be ruled out. So in this particular case, I can very confidently say that when it comes to this particular question, A is something that they'll have least amount of problem with, and therefore we should choose. In fact, we'll have no problem with, and therefore we can choose A as our answer. In B, C, and D, we do find something or the other through which we can raise an objection. Let's dive into our next question now. Which one of the following statements does not correctly express the similarity between the Isegran Shrine and the Cathedral of Freiburg Minster? Let's start. Option A says both can be regarded as very old structures. Let us check. So when we talk about the Isegran, 1300-year-old, and when we talk about this particular cathedral, we know that these stones are from Middle Ages, and we know that it is getting eroded with time, so that these things suggest that it is old. So we can say both of them are old structures. So the question says which of the following does not correctly express the similarity. So when it comes to A, both are similar, right? So you can eliminate A. B says both will one day be completely rebuilt. Now in the case of in the case of the Isegran Shrine, it is rebuilt every 20 years. So will it be rebuilt in future? Yes, they rebuilt it every 20 years. So that pattern should repeat. And in the case of the cathedral, you notice, but at some point they too are removed and replaced with new stones. So old stones, once they become eroded, they are eventually replaced. So at some point of time in future, yes, both will be rebuilt. It is just that in the case of Isegran Shrine, we know that it has also been rebuilt in the past. The cathedral is not. But when it comes to the future, we can be certain that both will one day be completely rebuilt. So this also is something that points to a similarity. Let's rule it out. Then C, both were built as places of worship. So in the case of Isegran Shrine, it is a shrine which is kind of a temple and therefore a place of worship. In the other case, it is a cathedral. Cathedral is a type of church. It is a very large, more magnificent kind of a church. So a very large building for Christian worship, a very large church for Christian worship. And therefore, we can conclude that both of these are places of worship using our understanding of vocabulary, where shrine and cathedral are pretty everyday, obvious high frequency words. Both are continually undergoing restoration. So continually is frequently, at a regular interval. Now, in a way, even this is true, but here there is an issue. The issue is, we know with respect to the church that they continually check it for damage and then they replace it. So the process is more regular, more consistent in that case. What are they doing in the case of the shrine? It is happening at a 20-year frequency, so you can say continually, but the problem is the church is getting restored. The shrine is not restored, it is rebuilt. And there is a difference. And therefore, if we compare both of these, the shrine with the cathedral, we'd say that they are not similar in this respect. Whatever happens continually, yes, but in one case it is a restoration, in the other case it's a rebuilding. And therefore, because this does not express a similarity, this becomes our answer to this particular question. Let's go ahead and dive into the next one now. Question number 3. Which one of the following scenarios is unlikely to follow from the arguments in the passage? So basically, which one of these is true? So 3 of these should be true. One of these is can't say or false. That's going to be our answer. Let's start. Option A, a 17th century British painter would have no problem adding personal touches when restoring an ancient Roman painting. So here is a relevant part of the passage. Notice. So if you go by this, then A is definitely true. And therefore, it is likely to follow. We can eliminate it. How about B? B says a 20th century Japanese Buddhist monk would value a reconstructed shrine as the original. So, Buddhism, recycled, they are okay with it. Plus, remember the third paragraph where they have no problem, the shrine is rebuilt, but they're still okay with it. So, even this is true. So, it does follow. Let's rule it out. C, a 17th century French artist who adhered to a Christian worldview would need to be completely true to the original intent of a painting when restoring it. What happened? What exactly happened in the 17th century? We've talked about it in A. Excavated artworks were treated quite differently. They were not restored in a way that was faithful to the original. So the only thing that option C adds is it is a 17th century artist who is restoring something, but the difference is in C, we are not talking about a painting that came from antiquity, plus we are also introducing religion. So back in the 17th century, artists did not bother about it, but within that set, did their religion also influence their behavior when it came to restoring? We don't know. And was that the same thing that they did to a painting which was a contemporary or a recent painting as compared to an artwork of antiquity? We don't know. So when it comes to C, I'd say the label that we apply is can't say. How about D? A 21st century Christian scientist is likely to oppose cloning because of his philosophical orientation. Again, this point is mentioned as a point of difference between the West and the Far East. So Buddhists are okay with it, but the West are not cloning, right? And therefore D can also be inferred and be labeled as true. So A, B and D definitely follow. C is can't say and therefore is less likely to follow as compared to the other 3 options. Therefore, we should have no hesitation in choosing C as our answer to question number 3. So let's go ahead and dive into our 4th question now. The value that the modern West assigns to an unassailable original has resulted in all of the following except. So first up, what exactly is unassailable? Unassailable is something that is impossible to doubt or impossible to attack. So if my position is unassailable, you can't doubt it or question it or attack it. If a castle, if a fort is unassailable, you can't attack it and win, right? But in this particular context here, unassailable original will mean that you cannot tinker with the original. You cannot take liberties when it comes to the restoration of an original. So the value that the modern West assigns, modern, okay, 17th century, until 17th century, they did not have this problem. But in the present day, the value that they assign has resulted in all of the following except. So when you go with unassailable original, you do not want to change it at all while restoring it. So let's see. It discourages them from making interventions in ancient arts. Obviously, yes, this is true. So because the question says except, we are looking for something which is not true. So let's rule out A. B, it discourages them from carrying out human cloning. This can be true. C, it discourages them from simultaneous displays of multiple copies of a painting. True, because there can be only one original, right? So if you simultaneously display copies, the West will look down upon it. That is why Western museums send those copies received from the China back. So this is also ruled out. D, it allows regular employment for certain craftsmen. This also appears to be true. So I think A and C are very obviously true. B versus D. Now dig deep. Now let's look at it and look at it closely. So you notice I do not spend unnecessary time thinking about a particular answer choice unless the options compel me to. Now, when it comes to D, it allows regular employment for certain craftsmen. If I look at the example of a cathedral, we know that they are constantly creating figures that are a replica of the original. And the process is happening at a very slow pace because they need to be faithful to that original. So those craftsmen who are employed in that venture, they will of course get regular employment as long as the cathedral stands and the current philosophy does not change. They'd have that employment, so this is true. On the other hand, when I look at B, I want you to focus on one particular word in the passage. You notice it is probably this intellectual position that explains why Asians have far fewer scruples about cloning than Europeans. So this intellectual position is the idea of an unassailable original. But then it says it is probably this. The author is not certain. Now, when you look at option B, it does not introduce probably. It does not introduce a word like may. It is definitive. But you cannot be definitive on the basis of the information supplied by the passage. So this is can't say. So as we can see, A, C and D are true. B is can't say. It misses out on that probably, and therefore our answer to fourth should be option B. So that takes care of this particular passage for us. And here is something that I want to leave you with. Why don't you like the video before you read it? And then let's talk about this too. When I'm tested, I remember I've been blessed with that tender ember resting left of center in my chest. So whenever things become challenging, I remind myself that I have this fire burning in my heart. And that allows me to go through. So basically, remind yourself of your goals, the things, the reasons why you started on this journey, and that should help you continue and move towards all these different ventures that you want to do. So that's it for this particular session. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you need me, if you need my inputs on anything more, drop it down in the comments below. Until I see you next, stay safe, stay focused, stay in touch. Have a great day ahead.